Okay, you guys, story time. So I have talked about leaning into terror and, or even leaning into like being uncomfortable and those type of things, and what the payoff becomes is one of the things that Bogart talks about. So I'm not a person that typically is very shy when it comes to talking to people, even someone supposedly famous or whatever. But there's once in a while, you're like, oh gosh, I don't want to be in a position or whatever. Okay, so here's a story about kind of leaning into a moment of should I or shouldn't I, as far as terror, and then what developed out of it. So I have to start the story with there is a playwright named Neil Labute. He is arguably the most prolific modern American playwright that we have today. For all my years at USF, students just devoured his work. His plays tend to be about subjects that 20 somethings are interested in. He tends to the characters are typically in their 20 somethings, so it's just really literature that they find themselves loving. So that's the first thing. His name is Neil Labute, and still incredibly prolific writer. And so that's the first part of this. Well, he had a play called The Shape of Things that I went to see in the Promenade Theater in New York. It starred Paul Rudd and Gretchen Mol and Rachel Weisz and Frederick Weiner. Okay, cast of four. Went and saw it, loved it. But a year or so later, it became available to do. So I decided I was going to direct it at USF, and our students just ate it up. Certainly, the students that were in it and worked on it, but also as a student body, it was pretty potent as a subject matter. And the other thing about Labute's work is that there's always this twist at the end that you did not see coming. Okay. All right. So about a year or so later, I was going to the Sundance. I was at the Sundance Film Festival, which I had been going to every year, every January, and saw that Labute, the playwright, had also decided to find the money and create this, take the play and make it a movie. So, that happens. We have things that transfer mediums from screen to stage and vice versa. But what he had done that was interesting is that he used the same four actors that he had on stage at the Promenade. He cast the very same and used them in the film. And frankly, if you know those names, they're movie stars anyway, or have become so. But it was somewhat unusual. Usually casting becomes a little different when things switch mediums. But I'm at Park City. I'm at Sundance. I score myself a ticket to go. I'm at the Eccles Theater. And after you screen a film at Sundance, and it's the first time anybody has seen it, they do a Q&A of anybody who's there that was involved in the project. And Labute was there along with his entire team. So then they go on the stage and people get to ask questions of it. And the first two questions are always the same because it's independent theater, because there is a ceiling on how much money can be used in an independent film, as well as how many days they can shoot and so on. So he's up there with his team, and the first question comes in, which is, how many days did you shoot? And Labute's response was, all of them. Of course, people kind of laugh, and it's like, okay, the next question comes in. So, what was your budget? And his response was something like, well, all of it. We used all of it. And again, people kind of laugh, but he went off to all the rest of the questions that were asked after the Q&A all had this kind of like biting snarkiness to it, which is a lot of that's in his writing too. So I'm thinking, okay, but it was kind of disappointing because I wanted to really like him as a human because I just love his writing. So anyway, now I'm going to fast forward to New York about a year later, and I'm in the city for like a week or so doing a class. And one of my students, Gina, had said to me before I left, "Hey, when you go, you have to go to the Public Theater. I see Neil Labute's new play, which is called This Is How It Goes, is opening down at the Public Theater." And I mean, I kind of knew that whenever I go into New York, I would see at least, gosh, in a week, I would see probably 9 shows. And so I get in a class one day, run down to the Public Theater and try to get a ticket, and it was sold out. It wasn't just sold out for that night. The run was sold out. And what was interesting about that, it hadn't even opened yet. It was still in previews. So in theater, what previews are is it could last anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, of where the show opens up and the public is allowed, people buy tickets to come in. It's like regular theater, but the press can't come in. So like there's no critiques, that type of thing. So this is still previews. And not only can I get a ticket for that night, I can't get a ticket. I'm like, oh, hey, it's okay. I'm here for like the next week and whatever it was. She's like, no, there's no tickets at all. So turned out that George Wolfe, who very, very famous director, African-American director, had chosen This Is How It Goes as the last play that he was going to direct before retiring. George Wolfe was really important with the public theater and Shakespeare in the Park and so on. And he was known for doing plays that had some type of African American slant to it. And this play that Neil had written, who's a white guy, but he had written, This Is How It Goes, was a play based on racism. And it starred Jeffrey Wright, Amanda Peet, and Ben Stiller. Okay. So I'm there, I'm talking to the box office lady, and I'm like, seriously, I just need one ticket. She's like, no, man, I'm sorry, we're really sold out. So she said, what you can do though, is we may have cancellations if you want to get in, sit here for the next 2 hours once, so I'm like, all right. So I quickly ran back to my apartment, changed my clothes in case I got in, grabbed some, sushi to go, and planted my butt down in front of this box office for the next 2 hours. And so I'm sitting there reading my text from my class, and I look over the lobby, and there's Neil Labute, who, of course, I recognize because of Sundance. And I get this wave of terror. And thinking, oh my God, there he is. And it was terror, though. I mean, not that I get real nervous over it. I mean, even like right now, I get this, my pulse starts to race thinking about this. I thought, all right, you can lean into it, or you can sit your butt here with these other, 15 people trying to get tickets of other people that don't show up, which probably won't happen. So I get up and I walk over. And I said, introduced myself. I said, hi, you're Neil Labute. He said, I am. I said, I really, I love your work. I said, more importantly, I'm a theater professor. My students love your work. And I said, so, I just want to say, thank you for that. And I said, but I do have a couple questions. I said, it's this. I said, I was at Sundance last year when they was doing the Q&A, and I was really confused by the Q&A at Sundance. And he's like, oh, you were there. And I said, yeah, I was. I said, was there a reason you were such an a-hole? And I actually said the word. And he looked at me kind of like, what now? Like shocked. And I said, yeah, you were really a jackass during the Q&A. And I was just wondering, I mean, was that part of a shtick, or did you have a bad day? And he was, what now? Who are you? And I said, again, I'm a theater professor in the Midwest. I'm in town for a couple of weeks or what. I don't remember how long I was there, but taking a class and huge fan. I said, but the good news is this. I said, I just want to say this to you, that if you never write another play, ever, that you will always be done, because my students think that they discovered you like my generation thinks we discovered Tom Stoppard, who, you can look him up. Tom Stoppard is probably the greatest living playwright. He's English, and we love him. And he said, I don't quite, and he was so, I don't know if he was terrified too, now that I think about it, but he was like, what now? Seriously. I said, my students leave my program after 4 years wanting to walk into any gig, whether they're going to teach or act or tech. They want to tech your shows. They want to be in your shows. They want to direct your shows. They want to do dramaturge on your shows. And I said, so if you never write another play again, your legacy thus far is so rich. And he kind of smiled and he said, this is a very odd conversation. He said, and then it went from like the rudest thing anybody's ever said to me to like the nicest thing anybody has ever said to me in one conversation. And my response was, well, I know it's not the rudest thing anybody's ever said to you. I've read some of your reviews of your earlier work. And started to laugh. And he started to laugh. And he said, are you going to the show? And I said, no, I can't get a ticket. But if you know of anybody of importance, I'm sitting over there by the ticket line trying to wait for a cancellation ticket. And again, introduced myself. Thank you. Nice to meet you. And sat down. And about 10 minutes later, he walked over and he said, hey, you, let's go. And anyway, I went to This Is How It Goes with Neil Labute. And then afterwards went out for dinner with he and the cast and the director and got to meet them all. And to this day, Neil and I are very good friends. I think I keep him pretty honest. For my years at USF afterwards, he was very gracious in doing like conference calls with my students, meeting with us if we were having a school trip in New York City, uh, and yeah, so it's kind of a fun story about a moment for me that I was a little frozen in terror, going, okay, you can either risk this and go over and have a conversation, or you can sit here. And yeah, so the terror ended up leading into really a lifetime of a good friend. And I've learned a lot from him over the years, and certainly my students have. So there's a story about leaning into a moment of conversational terror. All right. Thanks. Bye.